Why were ancient texts about angels banned by the early church? Here's something they don't teach you in Sunday school. The early Christian church was terrified of people learning too much about angels. Not because angels were evil, but because they were too powerful, too present, too godlike. And that created a massive problem for a religion trying to establish itself as purely monotheistic. Think about this for a second. In the first few centuries after Christ, church leaders actively suppressed writings about angels. Books were banned. Teachings were condemned. People who talked too much about celestial beings were labeled heretics. Why would they do that if angels were just harmless messengers? The answer is simple: because angels had names, personalities, powers, and followers. Just like the gods of Greece, Rome, Egypt, and every other ancient culture Christianity was trying to replace. Let me paint you a picture. In Norse mythology, you had the Aesir, divine beings with specific roles, leading armies, shaping destinies. In Hinduism, you had devas, controlling elements, guiding souls, intervening in human affairs. In ancient paganism, every god had a domain, purpose, a relationship with humanity. And in Judaism, Christianity's foundation, you had something called the sons of God, celestial beings with free will, authority, and the ability to defy the Creator himself. Now, here's where it gets wild. When you read the apocryphal texts, those books that didn't make it into the official Bible, you discover that certain angels were worshipped. They had shrines. They received offerings. People called on them by name for protection, healing, guidance. Does that sound familiar? Because it's exactly what people did with Zeus, Odin, Shiva, and every other deity in human history. The church had to draw a hard line. They had to make it clear: you pray to God alone, not to Michael, not to Gabriel, not to Raphael. But here's the catch: those names never disappeared. Those beings remained central to Christian tradition. They just couldn't be worshipped, only acknowledged, respected, invoked in prayer. Which, if you really think about it, isn't that different from how people related to gods in other traditions? Stay with me, because what's coming next will show you specific connections between angels and ancient gods that'll make you see religion in a completely different light. Drop the word "awaken" in the comments if this is already shifting your perspective. Hit that like button and subscribe, because we're just getting started. How ancient gods were rebranded as angels and demons in Scripture. Here's where the story gets really interesting. When Christianity spread across the Roman Empire and beyond, it didn't just replace the old religions, it absorbed them, transformed them, and rewrote their narratives. The gods people had worshipped for thousands of years didn't vanish. They were reclassified, renamed, split into two categories: angels and demons. Let's look at the evidence. In Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest monotheistic religions, you had Ahura Mazda as the supreme god, surrounded by divine beings called the Amesha Spentis. Sound familiar? These weren't just abstract concepts. They were powerful entities with specific functions: truth, devotion, mortality, wholeness. The Jewish exile in Babylon brought them into contact with these ideas, and suddenly, Jewish angelology exploded with new details, hierarchies, and names that hadn't existed before. Now flip to the Islamic tradition. In the Quran, angels are everywhere. Jibril brings revelation. Mikhail controls nature. Israfil will blow the trumpet at the end of days. Azrael takes souls at death. These aren't just messengers, they're cosmic forces with individual identities and massive power. Yet Islam maintains strict monotheism. How? By making it absolutely forbidden to worship them. You acknowledge them, respect them, but never pray to them directly. Compare that to Hinduism, where the line between gods and celestial beings gets beautifully blurred. The devas aren't the ultimate reality, that's Brahman. But people absolutely worship them, build temples to them, offer prayers to them. Indra commands thunder, Agni controls fire, Vayu governs wind. Different names, different culture, but the same concept: powerful non-human beings managing different aspects of creation. And here's the kicker: when Christianity encountered pagan Europe, something fascinating happened. The old gods didn't die. They went underground. Bridget became Saint Bridget. Sacred well stayed sacred, just with new names attached. And the angels? They quietly took on roles that used to belong to local deities: protection, healing, guidance. Weather control, all the things people used to ask gods for, they now asked angels for. The Buddhism tradition shows us another angle. The Dharmapalas, protector deities, look fierce and powerful, almost demonic by Western standards. But they're not evil. They're enlightened beings taking wrathful forms to protect the teachings and destroy obstacles. Good or evil isn't about their appearance. It's about their purpose. If you're starting to see the pattern, comment transform below. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, because the next part reveals who these beings really were before religions renamed them. What if the fallen angels were actually humanity's first teachers? Now, we're getting to the part that changes everything. Let's talk about the so-called fallen angels, the ones who supposedly rebelled against God and got cast out of heaven. But here's the question nobody asks. What if they weren't rebels at all? What if they were teachers, liberators, the ones who gave humanity the tools to evolve beyond primitive survival? Look at the Book of Enoch, one of the most important texts in ancient Judaism and still considered scripture in Ethiopian Christianity. It tells the story of the Watchers, 200 angels who came down to earth, fell in love with human women, and made a choice that would change everything. They taught humans metallurgy, so we could forge tools and weapons. They taught astronomy, so we could navigate and understand the cosmos. They taught herbalism, cosmetics, writing, mathematics, and yes, magic. They didn't come to destroy, they came to uplift. But according to the official narrative, this was forbidden knowledge. God didn't want humans to have it. So these angels were condemned, bound, and cast into darkness until the final judgment. They became the villains of the story, the fallen ones. Now, let's travel to ancient Greece. Prometheus saw humanity suffering in darkness and ignorance. He defied Zeus, stole fire from the gods, and gave it to mortals. For this act of compassion, he was chained to a rock where an eagle ate his liver every day for eternity, punished for helping humans. But humanity, we thrived. We built civilizations. We created art, philosophy, technology, all because someone broke the rules. In Mesoamerican mythology, Quetzalcoatl descended from the heavens and taught the people agriculture, astronomy, mathematics, and writing. He wasn't punished, he was revered as a god. Same action, completely different interpretation. The Sumerian texts, some of the oldest writings in human history, speak of the Anunnaki, celestial beings who came from the heavens and shared knowledge with humanity. They taught civilization itself. And depending on which translation you read, they either saved humanity or created us in the first place. See the pattern? Across every culture, every continent, every ancient tradition, you find the same story: celestial beings who descended, shared forbidden knowledge, and elevated humanity from ignorance to enlightenment. The only difference is whether the storyteller calls them heroes or criminals. So here's the real question: were the fallen angels punished for sin, or for loving humanity too much? Comment, enlighten. If this is resonating with you, like and subscribe, because what comes next connects all of this to spiritual practices you might be doing right now without even realizing it. How do modern spiritual practices still call upon these ancient beings? Here's the truth that ties everything together: these celestial beings never left. They're still here, still being called upon, still answering prayers and guiding seekers. The only thing that changed is the language we use to reach them. And once you see this pattern, you can't unsee it. Walk into a Catholic church, and you'll see people lighting candles to Saint Michael, asking for protection against evil. Visit a Hindu temple and watch devotees offer flowers to Ganesha, removing obstacles from their path. Attend a Buddhist ceremony and witness monks invoking Avalokiteshvara for compassion and guidance. Step into a Neopagan circle and feel practitioners calling upon the goddess in her many forms. Different names, different rituals, same fundamental practice: humans reaching out to beings beyond the physical realm for help, wisdom, and transformation. Think about what happens when you meditate and set an intention, when you pray before bed, when you ask the universe for a sign, when you work with crystals, burn sage, or visualize white light protection. You're doing exactly what shamans did 10,000 years ago. You're acknowledging that reality has layers, that consciousness exists beyond the body, that we can communicate with forces greater than ourselves. In Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah teaches about divine emanations, different aspects of God's presence manifesting at different frequencies. In Sufism, the mystical branch of Islam, saints and spiritual masters continue guiding seekers even after death. In indigenous traditions worldwide, ancestor spirits and nature beings remain active participants in daily life. In modern New Age spirituality, people channel ascended masters, spirit guides, and angels using techniques that would look familiar to any ancient oracle or priestess. The methods differ, the cultural packaging changes, but the core experience? It's universal, it's timeless. It's the same conversation humanity has been having with the divine since we first looked up at the stars and wondered if something was looking back. Maybe we never lost touch with these celestial beings. Maybe we just learned to speak their names in different languages. Maybe every religion, every spiritual path, every mystical tradition is describing the same reality from a different angle, like blind people touching different parts of an elephant and describing what they feel. If you made it this far, you're one of the seekers. Comment unity below, smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and tell me, which spiritual tradition speaks to your soul the most?